I just want to let y'all know I found someone that I never want to lose. Myself, bitch. What the fuck you thought this was? I give a fuck about these people.
At exactly 6:47 p.m. on November 23, 2024, 6 gunshots shattered the quiet of a Fort Lauderdale apartment complex. 6 bullets that would end one man's life and expose a killer's twisted mind. But here's what makes this case truly chilling. While 46-year-old Jason Bloomfield's body decomposed for 6 days in a locked bedroom, his killer was posting about God and Satan on Facebook. Satan gets busy, but you gotta know when he's working so you can let God handle up on your behalf, 37-year-old Veanitta Lenon wrote, just weeks after she had emptied her gun into her boyfriend's chest. She was literally sleeping next to a rotting corpse while preaching about divine justice online. When Jason's 15-year-old son finally discovered his father's body, the smell of death had filled their home for nearly a week. And when police arrived at the scene, Veanitta showed up driving her dead boyfriend's car, putting on the performance of her life with what investigators would later describe as fake crying with no tears. So here's the question that'll haunt you. How do you live with a decomposing body for 6 days while posting inspirational quotes about God? Drop a comment if you've ever had a gut feeling about someone that turned out to be terrifyingly accurate, because this case will make you question everyone around you. This is the story of a woman who weaponized faith to hide murder, and the red flags that everyone missed until it was too late. Jason Bloomfield wasn't asking for much from life. At 46 years old, this Fort Lauderdale resident had simple pleasures that kept him grounded. He loved the Miami Dolphins with the passion that only true fans understand, the kind that sticks with a team through every heartbreaking season. His colleagues at Burger King could set their watches by his reliability. Jason showed up every single day, never called in sick, never missed a shift without notice. But what defined Jason most was his devotion to his family. His 15-year-old son meant everything to him. They had the kind of close relationship where missing a call or text was unusual. Jason's mother was also central to his world. The 3 generations stayed in constant contact, checking on each other regularly. Jason shared an apartment with his girlfriend, Veanitta Lenon. From the outside, they looked like any couple struggling to make ends meet in expensive South Florida. Money was tight, bills were piling up, and eviction notices were becoming a reality. But nothing about their financial stress suggested it was worth killing over. November 23, 2024 started as an ordinary Saturday for Jason. He had no idea that the woman sleeping beside him had already decided it would be his last day on Earth. He couldn't have known that within hours, 6 bullets would tear through his body while he sat in his own living room. That evening, around dinnertime, neighbors heard something that would haunt the investigation for months: 6 gunshots echoing from Jason and Veanitta's unit. 6 deliberate shots fired in rapid succession. Not the panicked single shot of someone defending themselves, this was execution. Those neighbors made a decision that investigators would later regret. Instead of calling 911, they assumed it was firecrackers, or maybe a car backfiring. In today's world, that assumption cost Jason Bloomfield his life and gave his killer nearly a week to cover her tracks. But while those gunshots were ending Jason's life, they were just the beginning of Veanitta's calculated performance that would shock even seasoned detectives. Veanitta Lenon wasn't some random girlfriend who snapped under pressure. At 4 feet, 11 inches tall, she might have looked harmless, but her criminal record told a different story. Born in Detroit and bouncing between Miami-Dade and Broward counties, Veanitta was what prosecutors would later classify as a career criminal, someone who made breaking the law a lifestyle. Her past was littered with convictions that should have been warning signs to anyone who got close to her. But if you scrolled through Veanitta's Facebook page, you'd see a completely different person. She posted constantly about God, work, family, and living comfortably. Her social media presence was filled with inspirational quotes and religious proclamations that painted her as a woman of faith trying to better her life. "My priorities are God, work, family, and living comfortably," she had posted just weeks before the murder. To anyone reading her posts, Veanitta appeared to be someone who had found her way through faith and determination. The reality was much darker. Financial stress was crushing both Jason and Veanitta. They weren't just short on rent, they were facing eviction from their Fort Lauderdale apartment. The pressure of losing their home was building to a breaking point. But while Jason was probably thinking about picking up extra shifts or finding a cheaper place to live, Veanitta's mind was going to much more sinister places. The relationship was also deteriorating. According to stories Veanitta would later tell neighbors and family members, Jason was cheating on her with his problematic ex-girlfriend. She painted herself as the victim of a man who couldn't stay faithful, someone who deserved sympathy rather than suspicion. But here's what investigators would later discover: every single story about cheating was a lie. Jason and Veanitta were still living together when he died. They hadn't broken up. The infidelity story was just another manipulation tactic from a woman who had spent years perfecting her victim persona. November 23rd wasn't just any day for their relationship troubles to explode. The combination was toxic: a career criminal facing homelessness, living with a man she was preparing to murder, all while maintaining her facade of religious devotion on social media. Her Facebook posts about Satan getting busy weren't random spiritual thoughts, they were the mindset of someone who was already planning something evil while preparing to blame it on divine intervention. November 24, 2024. Something unprecedented happened at the Burger King where Jason Bloomfield had worked faithfully for years. Jason didn't show up for his scheduled shift. His manager stared at the clock, then at the schedule, growing more concerned by the hour. In all his time at the restaurant, Jason had never been a no-show. If he couldn't make it to work, he called ahead. He was the kind of employee managers could count on. The manager tried calling Jason's phone multiple times throughout the day. Each call went straight to voicemail. By the end of what should have been Jason's shift, concern was turning into genuine worry. Meanwhile, Jason's family was experiencing their own panic. His 15-year-old son tried calling and texting repeatedly. Nothing. His mother, who spoke with Jason regularly, was met with complete silence. For a man who maintained close contact with his family, this disappearance was terrifying. But while everyone who cared about Jason was sick with worry, Veanitta Lenon was busy crafting her web of lies. When neighbors asked about the gunshots they'd heard the night before, she had her story ready: a friend of hers had fired those shots nearby. Just some random incident that had nothing to do with her or Jason. When Jason's family called the apartment looking for him, Veanitta's story changed completely. She told them she and Jason had broken up because he was cheating with his problematic ex-girlfriend. According to her version, Jason had simply walked out of her life. But here's what makes this story absolutely chilling: Jason's body was still in that apartment. He'd never left. He couldn't leave. Veanitta had dragged his corpse into the small bedroom after shooting him 6 times in the living room. For 6 days, she lived with his decomposing body while telling everyone who asked that he had abandoned her. The GPS records would later show that Veanitta left the apartment multiple times during those 6 days. She went to work. She ran errands. She drove around in Jason's silver BMW like nothing had happened. All while his body was rotting in their shared bedroom. But perhaps the most disturbing evidence of her calculated evil was what she posted on Facebook during this time. On December 11th, while Jason's corpse had been decomposing for weeks, Veanitta wrote, "Satan gets busy, but you gotta know when it's working so you can let God handle up on your behalf. Can't get me, but he will get got messing round with a anointed child of God." She was literally living with the evidence of her own evil while posting about being God's anointed child. The level of delusion and manipulation was staggering. Meanwhile, technology was quietly building the case against her. Cell phone records showed she was using Jason's phone to access his bank account. GPS data tracked her movements around Fort Lauderdale in his car. Most damning of all, Zelle transfers showed her stealing $500 from Jason's account after she had murdered him. Think about the coldness required for that. Your boyfriend is dead in the next room, and you're stealing his money. This wasn't desperation, it was calculated theft from a man she had just executed. November 29, 2024. 6 days of silence. 6 days of unanswered calls and growing panic from Jason's family. His 15-year-old son couldn't take the worry anymore. Neither could Jason's mother. They had been calling, texting, and agonizing over where Jason could be. He would never just disappear like this without telling anyone. They decided to go to the apartment and check on him themselves. Picture this moment, a teenage boy and his grandmother walking up to an apartment door, probably discussing who should knock first. They were worried, maybe even scared, but they had no idea they were about to walk into a nightmare that would traumatize them for life. They knocked. No answer. They called out Jason's name. Still nothing. Finally, they noticed that the back door had been removed from its hinges, something that had happened before. They moved the door aside and entered the apartment. The smell hit them first. Anyone who has ever encountered death knows that smell. It's sweet, sickening, and absolutely unmistakable. But they probably didn't recognize it immediately. Maybe they thought something had spoiled in the refrigerator or there was a plumbing problem. Then they found him. Jason Bloomfield's body was in the small bedroom, already in what police would later describe as advanced stages of decomposition. For 6 days in Florida's heat and humidity, his corpse had been rotting away while his killer went about her daily routine. Imagine being that 15-year-old boy. Imagine searching for your father and finding his decomposed body hidden under a pile of clothes and blankets. Imagine the scream that tore from his throat when he realized what he was looking at. Imagine his grandmother trying to shield him from the sight while fumbling for her phone to call 911. The 911 call that came in that day was heartbreaking. A family member finding their loved one dead is always tragic, but finding them like this, after days of wondering where they were, after days of hoping they were okay, is the kind of trauma that changes people forever. Within minutes, police cars and ambulances were racing toward the Fort Lauderdale apartment. Crime scene investigators were called in. The medical examiner was notified. What had started as a missing person case was now officially a homicide investigation. But here's where this story takes an even more twisted turn. While Jason's son and mother were making the most horrific discovery of their lives, Veanitta Lenon was somewhere else entirely, probably thinking she had gotten away with the perfect murder. She was wrong. Just as police were securing the crime scene and processing the horror they were witnessing, something incredible happened. Veanitta Lenon showed up. She pulled into the apartment complex parking lot driving Jason's silver BMW. Think about that audacity for a moment. She was driving her murder victim's car to the scene where his body had just been discovered. The boldness was breathtaking, but what happened next was even more shocking. As soon as Veanitta saw the police cars and ambulances, she immediately started wailing about how devastated she was to learn about Jason's death. She was crying, screaming, making a huge scene about her grief and shock. But there was one crucial problem with her performance. The police officer who watched her act wrote something very specific in his report that would become key evidence. Veanitta was fake crying with no tears. She was making all the sounds of someone who was heartbroken, but her eyes were completely dry. This wasn't grief, this was acting, and it was terrible acting at that. The officer's trained eye caught what family members might have missed in their own shock and trauma. Real grief doesn't look like a performance. Real tears don't turn on and off like a faucet. But Veanitta was putting on a show, and seasoned investigators weren't buying any of it. While she was busy with her fake crying routine, detectives were already starting to piece together what had really happened. They talked to neighbors who confirmed hearing 6 gunshots on November 23rd. They spoke with Jason's manager at Burger King, who confirmed he'd never shown up for work after that date. Most importantly, they started examining Veanitta's various stories, and those stories were falling apart faster than she could tell them. Remember how she told neighbors that a friend had fired those gunshots nearby? Detectives checked police records for the area that night. No reports of gunshots anywhere else in the neighborhood. No calls about random shooting incidents. Her story was complete fiction. Then there was the story about Jason cheating and them breaking up. But if they'd broken up, why was she still living in the apartment? Why was she driving his car? Why hadn't anyone else heard about this dramatic breakup between a couple who lived together? The crime scene itself told an even more damning story. Jason's body had been moved after death. He hadn't died in that small bedroom where his family found him. Blood evidence showed he'd been shot in the living room, then dragged to the bedroom. Someone had also tried to clean up the blood and moved a couch to block the bedroom door. This was calculated. Someone had killed Jason, moved his body, attempted to clean up evidence, and then went on with their life for 6 days while his corpse decomposed. And that someone was standing right in front of them, fake crying without a single real tear. As detectives processed more evidence, they discovered something that made their blood run cold. Veanitta had been using Jason's phone after his death, sending text messages to his family members from his number. "I'm with my friend from the past," she had written to Jason's sister, pretending to be him. "Me and Vita aren't working out, so she went back to her family's house and I'm single now." Jason's sister later told police that these messages were unusually long and sent late at night, compared to his normal communication style. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't have imagined her brother was already dead while someone else was using his phone. In today's world, your phone tells a story whether you want it to or not, and Veanitta Lenon's digital footprint was about to become her downfall. When detectives pulled her cell phone records and GPS data, they found evidence that was absolutely damning. Her phone showed she had been at the apartment on November 23rd when those 6 gunshots were fired. Not nearby visiting a friend, not out of town, she was right there when Jason died. The GPS coordinates placed her exactly where the murder happened at exactly the time it happened. But the technology told an even more disturbing story. After Jason was dead, Veanitta had systematically accessed his bank account using his phone. She made Zelle transfers to herself, stealing money from a man whose corpse was rotting in the next room. Think about the level of coldness required for that, methodically draining your murder victim's accounts while sleeping next to his decomposing body. The crime scene reconstruction painted a picture that was even more horrifying. Jason hadn't died in that small bedroom where his family found him. Blood spatter evidence showed he'd been shot multiple times in the living room, probably while he was just sitting there, maybe watching TV or eating dinner. 6 gunshots. That's not someone who panicked and fired once in self-defense. That's not an accident or a crime of passion. That's execution. Veanitta had deliberately emptied her gun into Jason, making absolutely sure he was dead. After the murder came the cover-up that showed just how calculated this killing really was. Veanitta had dragged Jason's body from the living room into the small bedroom. Picture that scene. A 4'11" woman dragging a grown man's dead weight across apartment floors. The blood trail, the physical effort required, the complete lack of emotion needed to treat your boyfriend's corpse like furniture. She then tried to clean up the blood using Clorox bleach, rags, and a mop. But cleaning up blood isn't as easy as it looks in movies. Blood seeps into cracks, soaks into wood, leaves microscopic traces that forensic investigators can find even when you think you've scrubbed everything clean. After attempting to erase the evidence, Veanitta moved a couch to block the bedroom door where Jason's body was hidden. This wasn't panic, this was planning. She was creating a barrier so that if anyone came to the apartment, they wouldn't accidentally discover what she'd done. The cell phone evidence revealed perhaps the most chilling aspect of her behavior. While Jason's family was frantically calling and texting him, worried sick about where he was, Veanitta was reading those messages. She was watching his mother panic. She was seeing his 15-year-old son's desperate texts asking where his dad was. And she did nothing. She let them suffer for 6 days, knowing exactly where Jason was and exactly what had happened to him. The GPS data showed Veanitta had left the apartment multiple times during those 6 days. She went to work, ran errands, and drove around in Jason's car like nothing had happened. All while his body was decomposing in their shared home. But perhaps the most damning piece of digital evidence was her Facebook activity during this period. While living with her victim's corpse, she was posting about God and Satan and divine justice. "Satan gets busy, but you gotta know when he's working so you can let God handle up on your behalf," she wrote, while literally surrounded by the evidence of her own evil. Every lie she had told was falling apart under technological scrutiny. Every story was being exposed as complete fiction. The evidence was overwhelming, and it all pointed to one terrifying conclusion: Veanitta Lenon had murdered Jason Bloomfield in cold blood, then spent 6 days living with his corpse while stealing his money and lying to everyone who loved him. The investigation took months as detectives built what they knew would need to be an airtight case. Every piece of evidence had to be processed, every lie had to be documented, Every aspect of Veanitta's deception had to be proven beyond reasonable doubt. On May 2, 2025, more than 5 months after Jason's murder, justice finally caught up with Veanitta Lenon. A patrol officer in Fort Lauderdale recognized her from the arrest warrant and took her into custody. After months of thinking she had gotten away with the perfect murder, her freedom was over. But prosecutors weren't finished with her yet. When they examined Veanitta's extensive criminal history, they saw a pattern that went far beyond this single murder. On May 5, they filed what's called a career criminal felony case against her. This wasn't just about Jason's death anymore, this was about a woman who had made crime her way of life. The charges were severe. Second-degree murder with a firearm and fraudulent use of a deceased person's personal identification information. That second charge stemmed from her theft of Jason's money after killing him, adding financial crime to cold-blooded murder. On May 28, Veanitta stood before a judge for her arraignment. This was her opportunity to show some remorse, to admit what she had done, to acknowledge the pain she had caused Jason's family. Instead, she pleaded not guilty to all charges. Even with overwhelming evidence against her, even with her lies completely exposed, even with digital proof of her guilt, Veanitta was still trying to manipulate the system. She was still playing the victim instead of accepting responsibility for murder. The judge wasn't buying her performance. Bond was denied, meaning Veanitta would remain locked up at the Paul Rain detention facility in Pompano Beach while awaiting trial. No amount of fake tears or religious posts would get her out this time. As of now, she's still there, still claiming innocence, still refusing to take responsibility for the cold-blooded execution of Jason Bloomfield. But the evidence speaks louder than her lies ever could. This case is a masterclass in recognizing red flags before they turn deadly. Jason Bloomfield should still be alive today, and the warning signs were there for anyone who knew how to look. Veanitta's criminal history should have been the biggest red flag. She wasn't someone who had made one mistake years ago, she was a career criminal with a pattern of escalating behavior. People don't usually go straight from petty crime to murder, but they do escalate when they feel trapped and desperate. The financial stress was another crucial warning sign. When people are facing homelessness and have a history of choosing crime over legitimate solutions, that desperation can turn deadly. Jason and Veanitta weren't just short on rent, they were about to lose their home entirely. Her constantly changing stories should have raised immediate suspicions. When someone's explanation for important events keeps shifting, when details don't add up, when simple questions get complicated answers, those are signs of deception that can indicate much bigger problems. The neighbors who heard those 6 gunshots made a crucial mistake. In today's world, we cannot afford to assume that sounds like gunshots are something innocent. When you hear what might be gunfire, especially multiple shots in rapid succession, call 911 immediately. Let police decide if it's worth investigating. Jason's co-workers and family did everything right. They noticed when he disappeared, and they took action. But imagine if someone had recognized the warning signs earlier, if someone had seen how desperate Veanitta was becoming about money, if someone had questioned her shifting stories about their relationship. The social media disconnect was another red flag that's becoming increasingly common. When someone's online persona doesn't match their real-life behavior, when they're posting about God and morality while living completely different lives, that's a warning sign worth paying attention to. Most importantly, this case shows us that financial stress can be a deadly trigger when it meets the wrong person. If you're in a relationship where money problems are causing constant conflict, get help. If your partner has a criminal history and starts acting desperate about finances, don't ignore those warning signs. Jason Bloomfield's murder didn't just end one life, it destroyed an entire family and traumatized a community that thought they were safe from this kind of evil. Jason's 15-year-old son will carry the trauma of finding his father's decomposed body for the rest of his life. That image, that smell, that moment when he realized what he was looking at, it's the kind of experience that changes someone forever. No teenager should have to discover their parents' corpse, especially not after days of decomposition in the Florida heat. Jason's mother will never forget the horror of that day. She'll never forget the panic of those 6 days when Jason wasn't answering his phone. She'll never stop wondering if there was something she could have done differently, some sign she should have recognized. The neighbors who heard those gunshots but didn't call police will live with guilt for the rest of their lives. They know that their decision to assume it was something innocent gave Veanitta 6 days to cover her tracks and traumatized Jason's family even more than necessary. Jason's co-workers at Burger King lost someone they counted on every single day. His absence left a hole in their workplace that reminds them daily that violence can reach anyone, anywhere, at any time. But perhaps the most tragic ripple effect is how this case will make everyone a little more suspicious, a little less trusting. When someone can murder their boyfriend and live with his corpse for 6 days while posting about God on Facebook, it makes you question everyone around you. The Fort Lauderdale community learned that evil can hide behind religious posts and fake tears. They learned that financial stress can turn deadly when it meets the wrong person. They learned that the people we trust most can sometimes be the most dangerous. This case teaches us crucial lessons about recognizing danger before it's too late. Here's what Jason Bloomfield's story should teach all of us. Trust your instincts about people. If someone's behavior doesn't match their words, if their stories keep changing, if something feels off about them, listen to that internal warning system. Your gut feelings exist for a reason. Pay attention to criminal histories. When someone has a pattern of breaking the law, especially with escalating charges, that's a predictor of future behavior. Career criminals don't usually stop being criminals just because they're in a relationship. Recognize financial desperation as a danger sign. When people are facing homelessness and have a history of choosing crime over legitimate solutions, that combination can turn deadly. Financial stress doesn't excuse murder, but it can trigger it in people who are already dangerous. Don't ignore sounds of violence. If you hear what might be gunshots, call police immediately. Don't assume someone else will report it. Don't assume it's something innocent. Let trained professionals investigate. Watch for social media red flags. When someone's online persona is dramatically different from their real-life behavior, that disconnect can indicate serious psychological problems. People who post constantly about morality while living immoral lives are often the most dangerous. Pay attention to isolation tactics. If your partner starts cutting you off from family and friends, if they discourage you from maintaining other relationships, if they want to control who you talk to, those are signs of someone who might be planning something terrible. Document everything. If you're in a relationship with someone who has concerning behavior, keep records. Save text messages, document strange incidents, tell trusted friends about problems. This evidence could save your life or help convict your killer. Most importantly, never ignore multiple red flags just because you love someone. Love doesn't excuse criminal behavior. Love doesn't make violence acceptable. Love doesn't mean you have to put yourself in danger to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. As we wrap up this horrific case, I want to hear from you, our true crime family. This story raises so many questions about how we protect ourselves and recognize danger. What do you think was the biggest red flag that could have saved Jason's life? Was it Veanitta's criminal history? The financial stress? Her changing stories? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where your gut was telling you someone was dangerous, but you ignored it to be polite? How many of us dismiss our instincts because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings or seem paranoid? What would you do if you heard 6 gunshots coming from your neighbor's apartment? Be honest, would you call 911 immediately, or would you convince yourself it was something innocent? How do you think Jason's 15-year-old son will recover from the trauma of finding his father's body? What kind of support does a teenager need after experiencing something that horrific? Should people with extensive criminal histories face more restrictions when it comes to relationships and living situations? Is there a way to protect potential victims without violating civil rights? What's the most disturbing part of this case to you? Is it the 6 days of living with the corpse? The fake crying at the crime scene? The religious Facebook posts while surrounded by evidence of murder? I want to hear your thoughts, your experiences, and your theories. Your comments help create a community where we can all learn to recognize danger and protect each other. If this case opened your eyes to red flags you hadn't considered before, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. When cases like this develop new information, when trials begin, when justice is finally served, you'll be the first to know. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Jason's story. Because staying informed isn't just about true crime entertainment, it's about protecting ourselves and the people we love from predators who are still out there, still hiding behind fake smiles and religious posts. Remember Jason Bloomfield. Remember the warning signs. And remember that your safety is worth more than anyone's feelings. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and trust your instincts. They might just save your life.